Thokozani, Thokozani Royals, Thokozani family. Come in, come in. How is everyone doing? Thokozani family. Welcome to our series on the Gregorian calendar. If you have not watched parts 1 to 3, they are on YouTube. You can find them on African with a K, Spirituality - Gogo Nkanyezi Speaks, Thokozani, and that's where you can find part 1 to 3. We are now doing part 4, and we are on the month of August. Thokoza, Jocelyn, how are you doing? So let's talk a little bit about the month of August. Where does that name come from? So the month of August comes from the name of Emperor Augustus Caesar. If you remember, we had Julius Caesar. Well, then there is Augustus Caesar, who was the grandnephew, right, of Julius Caesar. So, and he actually took the decision to name the 8th month after himself. He just decided, you know what, I'm naming this month after myself. And this happened in 44 BCE after his uncle, Julius Caesar, was assassinated. You guys, if you ever did Shakespeare in school, you guys know that Shakespeare, one of Shakespeare's stories is Julius Caesar, the play Julius Caesar. It wasn't a story, it was a play. And many of us who are on the African continent were tortured because we had to read Shakespeare as part of English literature. Right? It was a subject called English literature, and we had to read Shakespeare and Chaucer, Charles Dickens, and all those other barbarians. But we had to. We had no choice in the matter. And they used that old English to write all this stuff up. And the trauma, basically. But that's an aside. So now you know who Julius Caesar is, if you didn't know where to locate it in your own life. But now we're with Augustus Caesar. That is who the month of August is named after. Right, so here are some festivals. Here go the festivals. There go the festivals. It wouldn't be a month on the Gregorian calendar. It couldn't be a Roman month without a festival. Come on. There were festivals all the time. So there was the festival of Nemoralia. This was a festival of torches to honor the goddess Diana. Now, who was goddess Diana? Goddess Diana was goddess of the moon. She was goddess of fertility. She was goddess of wild animals. And she was patroness of the hunt, right? That is goddess Diana. And that festival took place from August the 13th to the 15th. It was characterized by putting, garlands of flowers around dogs. Putting garlands of flowers around dogs, and there were lots of sacrifices, as usual, lots of sacrifices. I don't want to keep repeating what sort of sacrifices those were. You guys already know. If you watch from part 1 to part 3, you will know fully well what I'm talking about. But definitely there were lots of the sacrifices going on. Right, so now here's the thing that many of you don't get. That, for those of you who've been Roman Catholic, there was a feast, or is a feast in the Roman Catholic calendar called the Feast of the Assumption of Mary into heaven, where she's then called Mary, Queen of Heaven. If you're Catholic, you'll know this feast. Well, would you know that that feast is celebrated in August, and it's celebrated on the around the feast, so 13th to the 15th. So 15th of August is the Feast of the Assumption, and that Goddess Diana, Mother Mary. Do you guys see where this is all going? So why do I mention this? I mention this because we know that the Roman Catholic Church is the foundation of all Christianity, right? The first Christian church is the Roman Catholic Church. So I'm trying to get you to see how some of the things that you may be taking part in or have taken part in are actually not what they seem. Because you have a lot of these holidays or feast days that were superimposed, right, on these ancient rituals to these deities that you know nothing about. Matter of fact, most of you know nothing about Mary either, because you ain't related to no Mary, or you ain't related to no Jesus, but still, you like these guys, right? But anyway, I digress. Then there was another festival. It was the Vinalia Rustica. This is the beginning of grape harvesting in Rome. In Italy, this was grape harvesting in the empire, basically, was August. And so there were lots of celebrations as grapes were harvested and they were pressed and fermented to make vino. So that is another festival. Then there was another one called the Valcanalia. Valcanalia Festival, that was the 23rd of August, and this one was dedicated to honor Vulcan, the god of fire. Vulcan, the god of fire. So what would happen at this festival? So this festival was basically a festival where lots of fires were lit. Lots of fires were lit. And then lots of, I don't want to get removed, so I'm going to try to put it in a way that is coded that you guys will understand. So lots of animals were thrown alive onto these fires, as well as lots of small beings that come out of women were also thrown onto the fire to appease Vulcan, the god of fire. Why was this festival there? This festival was there because it is in August, it is very hot, and there was worry that all the crops that had not yet brought fruit would be burnt basically in the field. So it was a way to try to combat drought situations. Right? Got it? So yeah, again, lots of sacrifice. The other thing is, I want to talk about two incidences. There was once, there was what was called the Great Fire of Rome. This fire literally razed Rome to the ground, burnt the whole city down, right? And when that city was burnt down, in order to appease Vulcan, a huge temple was constructed to appease this god. And of course, as part of the opening ceremony at this temple, there were lots of sacrifice. There was lots of fire, and there was lots of animals and small beings thrown onto that fire and incinerated in honor of Vulcan. Right. Now, there was another one. You guys know that you've heard of the city of Pompei, and how because of a volcanic eruption, Pompei was just smothered. And after that, people in Rome were left wondering whether they had not made enough sacrifice to Vulcan. So go figure, after that, in order for that never to happen again, what did they do? Sacrifice. Lots of sacrifice, right? So, they sacrificed a lot. They did. And so, again, That is the month of August. Let's go into September. So September. Septem in Latin means 7. Septem in Latin means 7. So why? In the original Roman calendar, remember September was the 7th month because March was the first month, was the beginning of the year. So the new year was always in March, right? March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So it would have been the 7th month. But in the Gregorian calendar, because they were busy just doing what they wanted and shifting things about, they decided to name the 8th month September. So if you look at it carefully, you see again just a whole bunch of people were just doing what they wanted, basically, right? So that 8th month is called September after the number 7, which is the number 7. Misalignment right there. So what goes on now in the month of September? Now this is very important again, because I need to keep emphasizing to you that the calendar, just like our calendar, was a lived thing. It wasn't just about marking certain days. It was a spiritual instrument. And where did they get this? They got this from our ancient ancestors. The only thing is that because of their nature, they had their kind of warped or aberrated way of honoring whatever it was they're honoring. But they pretty much were using the Gregorian calendar the same way our ancient ancestors did, right? With the whole sacred, I won't even call them sacred, but let's call them festivals, because that's what they call them. With all the festivals and the sacrificing and the going on, all this stuff, guys, is spiritual. So they did these things. Like I said before, the only issue was, who were they doing these rituals for? And that's where we have to really look at ourselves to say, as we partake of this calendar and its rituals, some of which are done undercover now, but a lot of which are done quite openly and we take part quite happily, what are we ritualing to and these entities? Because they have nothing to do with us, right? So now, September. Here are some rituals September. This month had what are called the Roman Games. You guys have heard of the Roman Games. They call them Ludi Romani, the Roman Games. These are the games that were held in big colosseums, in small amphitheaters, all across the Roman Empire. And what did these games consist of? Number one, they were the gladiators. What are gladiators? Gladiators were either slaves, they were either criminals, they were either prisoners of war who were taken and forcibly trained to use certain weaponry. And the weapons consist of either a sword, a club, a ball and chain. They were trained to use certain weapons. And at this feast, right, at these Roman Games, which were held in these amphitheaters from 12th to the 14th of September, it was like a whole thing going on across the whole Roman Empire. These gladiators had to enter into the ring, and then they had to fight each other to the death. Like I said, there were different types of gladiators based on the instrument around which they were trained. It didn't have a choice in it, by the way. If you were a slave, if you were a prisoner of war, if you were a criminal, you had no choice in what happened. You got trained as a gladiator, and then you went in and you fought. And it was battling till the death. So that was what the games consisted of. The other thing the games consisted of, they had these chariot races. Now, the chariot races were such that, they had like a track. If you guys think horse racing, all that stuff comes from sort of those ancient Roman traditions. So there's a track, and then there are these chariots, and they just ride round and round, and whoever wins, wins. That's pretty innocuous if you ask me. But Then there was another aspect of this, which was the animal fights, where they would have exotic animals that they imported from different parts of the world, such as lions, tigers, and they would put them in a ring to fight each other. And again, fight each other to the death. This is where your dog fighting and all these other your things really that kind of I would call it that kind of it's these sports are very, very cruel and very violent, and I think they have their roots in that. Because I mean, who enjoys watching animals tear each other to pieces? They do it in the wild because that's what, but to incite them to do that and to actually take pleasure in watching that is what some level of perversion that I don't understand. But that was part of the games. The other part of the games too is there were people who there were what they were called public executions, right? So if you had done wrong, if you I don't know what it is that you'd have to have done, but basically you could be thrown into the amphitheaters and lions released to just maul you to death. Or you could be, with a sword, right? Until that was the end of you. Or but the one they really seemed to like the most was when the animals came for you, because then with you running around screaming and you lose a leg here, you lose an arm there, this they really relish. And this were public, so people would sit in the amphitheaters. I'm going to put the pictures. They would sit in this huge amphitheater and watch. And this is where the amphitheater comes from. Now, you guys, let's look at it from a spiritual level. What all do you think is happening there? Many of you have heard of the term LOOSH, right? Loosh, which is a form of energy that is harvested from the torture of other people. Right? I don't want to go into detail again, but it is a real thing, and it is still happening today. In behind closed doors, there are many many sort of elites who are into this, and it's a way of staying young. There's always among these the palm-colored ones. There's always the search for immortality and wanting to live forever, because again, totally disconnected from any sort of spiritual realm, and everything that governs them is sort of fear-based. So I just wanted to put that there, that this, if you look at how these games were constructed, and if you understand the spiritual ramifications of what happens when you torture a being, what energy is released. And then, so there are those who feed off of that energy, right? So this really was the biggest festival. This was one of the biggest, like the Roman games were known throughout the world. They're written about in history books. And I've just given you a snippet of some of the horrific things that would happen during this time. Because I can't delve too deep into it because it's quite graphic. However, I really hope that you've learned. So now we've covered August and we've covered September. I'll be back with the next one where we cover the next couple of months until we're done. And the festivals continue. May you guys stay well, please stay conscious, stay woke, and get yourselves aligned. Masithokozeni.